Hello and welcome to this third and final segment of the series on acting strategically. I'm Steve Alley, a consultant with Ekstrom & Associates. In part one of this series, I talked about what makes an effective strategic plan and how even the best of those efforts can get derailed. Part two described the acting strategically process, which takes your current actions and uses those to create, reconfirm, and prioritize strategy. In this third and final segment of the series, I'll take you through how to use what you developed in part two to set goals, define accountability, and give you some questions to think about as you move forward in your work. But first, let's take a step back at the typical strategic planning process and how this acting strategically process differs. In a typical process, you're really going from the top down with your vision, you develop the mission, goals, and then activities. In acting strategically, we're really going from the bottom up. It's really about what you are currently doing and how does that relate to the goals maybe that you have set or that you need to set, your mission and your vision and what you're trying to accomplish in the community. So this is the major difference between this. And again, this process is not designed to replace a full-blown strategic planning process, but is more of a checkpoint for you about where you are in your current work. In the last segment of the series, I talked about the first two steps in this process. The first, which is what are you currently doing, and the second, which is prioritizing the work. In this part of the process, we're going to go over the last four: setting or confirming your goals, defining your work, the accountability, and then we'll bring it together at the end. So let's go back again to that top priority, and we're just going to do the top priority for all these, and you can do this for your other priorities as you go through it. But the question that I have to ask you about that top priority activity that you're using is, what does success look like? How will you know that you have reached the level that you want to get to by doing that activity? So the answer to this question could become your goal statement or could be compared to your current strategies. Now what you're looking at, this is where you're looking at your activities on that bottom row and trying to reconfirm what you're doing with your goals. So take a minute to go through this and look at that and see if you can develop that goal statement out of the activity that top priority activity that you identified previously. Pause the program here while the work is being done, and then we'll come back together when you're done with that. Okay, now that you've defined what that goal looks like, you need to be able to define the work that must be done to be able to meet that goal. So you need to answer these questions. What are the systems, processes, and resources that have to be in place to make that success a reality? If you understand where you're trying to go now, what are you going to have in place to make that happen? What assets do you have? The people, financial resources potentially if you need to be. What do you still need to have? You may need more financial resources to do what you're talking about. How are you going to go about doing that? So really think through, what do we have to have in place to make this work? This can help you further define how you want to go about doing the work to be able to reach that goal. So again, you can pause the program here and then come back and restart it when you're ready to tackle the next phase of this work. Okay, now we're back and looking at the final, what I think is the most critical piece of this work, to ensure that there's accountability for accomplishing what you have just developed. The questions that are up on your screen should help you identify not only who is responsible, but what benchmarks you will use to determine progress. Who on staff is responsible? What's the board's role? How will you communicate? Who needs to know? What has to be done today, in 3 months, in a year? What you're really trying to be able to design is specifically who's going to do what. And then how are you going to report that out to make sure that those who need to know about it need to know about it? For example, is the board the primary group that needs to know about this particular activity? How often is that going to happen? How often is that report out? Is it going to be every meeting? Is it going to be every other meeting? All of those kind of things are important questions to be able to ask. But also, what has to be done today, I think, is the other critical part. What are you going to start doing or stop doing to be able to make sure that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish? Again, now you can pause the program here for a few minutes while you complete this aspect of the work, and then we'll come back together for some final questions. How do you bring this all together? You've done this for one activity or one goal. What you really need to do now is look at this activity process for each activity you believe is vital to the organization. Compare that to the goals. Are your goals still relevant? Is your mission, is your vision still relevant? Do you need to be thinking about doing something different? And so that's really the final step of the process, again, to make sure, are we on track with where we wanted to be able to be going forward? I want to leave you with some final questions for you to think about as you go forward with your work within your organization. The first is, what's the process you use to determine your activities? Oftentimes we make decisions about activities kind of unconsciously. We just do it because it comes up as a matter of course, but are you thinking about who's involved, who do you talk with, who makes the decision about it, and how do you communicate about it? If more resources are the answer, who can provide them? This is, it may be more fundraising, which is usually the answer, a better board sometimes, or something else. Is there another organization you might be able to partner with that could help you get to where you want to be able to go? If a more focused effort is required, what do you say no to? This is probably one of the hardest things for boards and for community foundations to really think about. How do you make that decision? How do you get more focused in the work? I always said to people, it's much easier to say yes in a community foundation than it is to say no. You can always find a reason to do something, but it's much more important to think now about how do you say no, and what do you say no to? Does the work of your board, does the board's work cover what matters most? Are your meetings run so that they cover issues that are critical to your success? Are you doing a lot of little things in the meetings rather than talking about, well, what's really the most important thing here? Is there agreement on accountability reporting? This doesn't have to be complicated. As a matter of fact, it probably shouldn't be complicated. It should match your size and capability as an organization. But it does have to be discussed. Well, you need new board policies, new board members, a new meeting format perhaps to be able to get to where you want to go. Are you inspired by the work you're doing? How can it inspire others? I know it sometimes feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, but I hope there's something in your work that enables you to be inspired. What is your story, and what do you need? Who do you need to tell it to? I often tell people that the most important thing that board members can talk about when they go out and talk to somebody about the community foundation is, why are they here? What inspires them to be involved? And are you talking about those kind of things and thinking about those things on a regular basis in your meetings? And how much time do you take and do you have to reflect, recharge, and realign? Is it daily, weekly, monthly? Do you have a 5-year plan? How often do you update it? These are all important questions. And then finally, and this is the most important question that I hope you'll take away from this entire process, what will you do tomorrow? What will you do this afternoon or tomorrow morning? The specific concrete steps are needed for your organization to be able to get to the next level. You can only build a community foundation kind of one step at a time and by what you learn. So let's all stop trying to eat the whole elephant and just take that first bite so that we can move on. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you've found this 3-part series to be helpful to your work, and I look forward to your comments.